And welcome to another edition of our treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is for October the 7th, 2018, Fall Quarter, lesson number 6. Today's lesson is entitled The Righteousness of Noah, and it's taken from Genesis, the 6th chapter, verses 9 through 22. Now, little background information. If you'll remember back to our lessons over the last few weeks, we've talked about the creation, the creation of mankind, how mankind was put in the Garden of Eden. Mankind fell. He was thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And over the course of time, after mankind came out of the Garden of Eden, he began to degenerate more and more into sin and corruption. And so that's where we're at in our storyline. Now, before we go into the story, let me just make a couple of things clear about where I fall on the story of the flood. I am a very literal interpretation of the Bible type of person. I believe the flood was global. I believe, with the exception of the animals that were on the ark and Noah, that all of the land and air animals and people were destroyed on the earth. That's how I interpret that. Not going to get into a big argument with anybody that believes that the flood was a localized flood, maybe in Mesopotamia, and that's where people were, as long as they agree that the entire human race was destroyed. That would be the big key thing into that. But it's not really logical, not internally consistent when you think that those animals were put on the ark to maintain the animal kingdom, if it was a local flood to only Mesopotamia. That wouldn't make sense at all, would it? But now, again, I'm not going to argue with anybody about it. It is a fascinating story. We get a little bit of insight into how the pre-deluge world was by looking at some of the things that are said in the story. Not going to make a big deal out of it. We want to really focus on the spiritual aspects of this story more than the mechanical things, but the world was a very unusual place before the flood occurred. And also, too, I am going to say this, and then I'll shut up about it, that by the fact that there was this huge global flood and then so much upheaval in the geological system of the earth, a lot of the things that people who believe that everything was just a consistent over billions of years, and a lot of their theories and everything, that invalidates a lot of their theories, because the flood was a universal catastrophic event over the entire earth. Okay, well, not going to say any more about the mechanics of this thing. Let's start talking about the story itself. Okay, Genesis 6, 9 through 10. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, point out a couple of things here. First off, the fact that the Bible declares Noah to be a just man and perfect in his generations. Now, this word perfect has changed over the course of time from when the King James Version was translated till now. Now, right now, in contemporary society, when we say something is perfect, we mean that it is without flaw, that it has no sin, it's completely sinless, no flaw, no anything. That is not what that word originally meant when this verse was translated. The word perfect means being mature and reasonable, rational, a full accountability, that kind of thing. That's really how you can interpret this. Does not mean that Noah did not have any sin. It means that Noah was a good man and that he tried to do his best all the time. That's really what that means. And also, too, we note that Noah had good fellowship with God. He had an ongoing relationship with God. And he had started his family, and his family was, he was raising his family upright, and that kind of thing. Okay. Now, Genesis 6:11 through 12. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So we see here this universal sin had just taken hold, and everyone had turned their back on God. They had begun to do vile, raunchy things, didn't have fellowship with God. They were making things up as they go, and they were just going out and sinning and doing every which way they possibly could think of doing. And I can't talk about this verse, these two verses, without making the observation that as I look around the world around me today, and especially my country, I see the same kind of thing, where I see so much corruption everywhere you turn. You see corruption in the government, you see corruption in the media, you see corruption in the church. It is a discouraging thing when we look around at the world around us. And if we think back to what Jesus was talking about, and he said, as in the days of Noah. And that is what I feel like today. We're in the days of Noah. When we look around and we see all this corruption, and we see that the destruction is right around the corner. And that's what the situation was in the days of Noah. Okay. The 13th verse, and God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And we see judgment. God is patient. God is kind. God is merciful. But there is going to come a time when judgment is going to get laid upon the earth. And just as in the days of Noah, we are in that same time period today. I believe that with all my heart. That we should be going about doing what we are called to do with the most vigor and expediency as we possibly can, because the days of violence on this earth, judgment is about ready to come. And that's the situation that Noah was being told by God he was in. is that I have put up with this, I have tolerated this, I have been long suffering, but the time of judgment is right around the corner. Okay? Now, 14 through 16, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. Now, couple of points that we want to make about this way of escape. First off, God in His infinite power could have encased Noah and those animals in some kind of bubble and just protected them without them doing a thing, and immediately sent the rain. But God did not do that. It took a long time for Noah to build that ark. And while he built that ark, according to the descriptions in the New Testament, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. So while he was building that ark, he was preaching to the people around him, and his life was a testimony to the people around him, and his life was a witness to the people around him. And from the description of when the rain began to fall and the flood happened, there wasn't really any need for having big boats or anything before this gigantic flood. So Noah looked like somebody awfully silly while he was making this ark. Yet he did it anyway. There are times where we are being put in places where we look silly and foolish because we are doing the right thing. But let me tell you without a shadow of a doubt that it's okay to look stupid in the eyes of the world, because just like Noah looked stupid the whole time he was making that ark, the minute the rain started falling, everybody got the message. They knew Noah was right and everybody else was wrong. Everybody should have been making them an ark. So don't worry if you look a little bit foolish at times. Okay? A couple of things, just maybe kind of technical things. First off is this word ark is a very unusual word in the Hebrew Old Testament, in the Tanakh. It is it only occurs one other place, and that is when the vessel that Moses was put in by his mother. It's only two places in the Old Testament where it occurs at, is when it's talking about the Ark of Noah and also the container that Moses was put in. And it's an unusual word. We're not real super sure exactly. No one's really super sure exactly all the aspects to this word. All we know is that in both cases it was a place of safety that God miraculously used to rescue somebody out of a lot of danger. Okay? And also, too, the gopher wood We have no idea what kind of wood that was. May very well have been that that was the only, that particular brand or species of trees was not carried forward from the flood. We don't know. It is actually a transliteration of the Hebrew word. There's no other reference to what it could be. But anyway, but this was a huge ark. I mean, it was a significant undertaking because they didn't have jackhammers and cranes or anything like that we know of. I mean, maybe they did. Because we really don't know the level society had gotten to before the flood. But I would assume they didn't have jackhammers and cranes and that kind of thing. And it would be a big deal to build a ship of this size. And also, talking about the ship itself, this was not like a propelled, guided, navigatable vessel. This was really just something that was going to hold everybody. It was the entire space was for the animals and the people and everything that was going to be in it. There was no place for any kind of rudders or anything of that nature. I mean, it was no sails, no nothing. I mean, it was just going to float. Okay. Now, 17 through 18, and behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life, from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy son's wife, with thee. So we see how God is making a covenant with Noah and the people that are going in the ark, how that they're going to be saved and being carried forward. Also, too, and again, just underscore this real super quick. God said that everything that's in the earth shall die. So now that to me kind of seals the deal on it being a universal flood. But anyway. Okay. And then 19 through 21. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all the food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So we see how that God's commanding Noah to let all of these animals into this ark. Now, there have been a lot of people who have made this attack on the Bible, saying that that there wasn't enough space to put for all the animals in the earth, all the different types of animals in the earth. Well, there is no indication, and it's silly for us to think that they brought 2 bulldogs, 2 poodles, two chihuahuas, 2 wolves, to all the different types of dogs. They were 2 canines were brought into that ark. And then out of those 2 canines came everybody else. The same way that all the different races in the world came from those 8 people that were in that ark. And they split off and from this natural variety and that kind of thing, that's where everything come from. So, it's kind of ridiculous. The people that claim we all come from an amoeba, the original amoeba, and we all came from them. And when you sit there and you tell them, well, that they were just the main groups of all the different animals, and they try to say, well, you're not believing it. It's kind of like they want to have it both ways. It's either one way or the other. But there are a lot of variety that comes into the world when people and animals breed and have children. Anybody who's had kids knows that you got 3 children. All 3 of them are different. They're not mirror duplicates. I mean, even if they're twins, they're not mirror duplicates because they'll have their own personality and everything. So that's what this is saying. Then when it says 2 of each kind went into that ark, it's talking about the main groups of animals. It could very well have been that they were 2 lizards that went into that ark, and they wasn't space for those big old dinosaurs, and they got left behind. And the 2 lizards they were representative of the rest of the group. Anyway, okay. Now, obedience. Genesis 6:22. Thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Obedience. We see in this story probably the most important thing in this story for us to understand is that Noah was given instructions and he followed those instructions. And that is exactly what we should be doing in this day and age. Jesus gave his life on that cross, was resurrected on the 3rd day, ascended into heaven, and then gave the baptism in the Holy Ghost. And that was for us to be empowered to go and preach the gospel to the 4 corners of the earth and to show people the difference between what is iniquity and righteousness, to live a life of testimony in this godless, sinful generation, to be a testimony, to be different, to be a peculiar people in this world, to show what being a Christian is really like. Not trying to overcome by some political ballot box, not trying to come over by wealth and power and influence, but to preach the gospel. To preach the gospel. Okay? And that pretty much, that is my concluding thought on today's lesson. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be with you next weekend for next week's lesson.